Scream, released in 1996 and directed by Wes Craven, was a horror movie that, quote, reinvented the horror genre. The reason I put that phrase in quotes is because it has been used to death.
It basically reinvented the horror genre.
Continually reinvented the horror genre.
It's hard to overstate the impact Scream had on the horror genre. It reignited slasher flicks.
Kind of revitalized the slasher genre to a degree.
Get the horror genre the swift kick that it needed right in the ass. And that's what Scream did.
But it's true. Scream really was revolutionary at the time of its release, with many praising its meta-commentary, humor, references to other horror movies, and the mystery as to who the killer was. For this video, I will be analyzing the film's music, both the original score and the licensed songs, to see exactly how they enhance the film's quality. Before I start my analysis, there's a few things I'd like to express. Number 1. This is my second music analysis video, with my first one being about Shin Godzilla. I originally made that video as a film project for a film class, so I had to fit my analysis within a specific time frame, specifically 3 minutes and 30 seconds, and I also had to be a lot more professional. In the end, I only used 4 examples for my analysis. While I do think I did a good job with my Shin Godzilla video, and so did my professor, one thing I'm excited about for this video is that I have total freedom in making it. I can decide how short or long I want it to be, what examples to use, and can be a bit more informal and show off more of my personality and personal opinions. Number 2. Yes, I am 100% trying to capitalize off of the release of Scream 2022, aka Scream 5, so that my video will gain more traction from the YouTube algorithm. That is not to say that this video is clickbait or will be uninformative though, but I am hoping that people's search trends will lead them here. Number 3. I will be spoiling everything in this film right off the bat. The deaths, the survivors, the killer, everything. This film came out in 1996, so you all should have watched it by now. But if you haven't, I highly recommend watching it. From a film critic standpoint, Scream is very good. It has great characters, great pacing, a compelling story, suspense, and many simultaneous mysteries that all have satisfying conclusions. There's my simple review of the film. But anyway, this is my official spoiler warning, and I'm probably going to spoil the other films in this franchise too. You have been warned. So how exactly will my music analysis play out? Basically, anytime music can be heard during the film, and in some cases silence, I will discuss it. From small musical cues to full tracks, I will try to cover everything and give the most in-depth music analysis of Scream to ever exist. Now that we pretty much covered everything, let's begin. The movie begins with the Dimension Films logo accompanied by a low-pitched drone, which gradually fluctuates between pitches. This is followed by the sound of either lightning striking or a loud crash, mixed with high-pitched sounds reminiscent of the scrape of a blade or a scream. Finally, we hear a whoop-sounding noise that introduces the title. This noise plays throughout the film at crucial moments of tension. Now you might be thinking, wow, you're actually going to analyze every little musical cue. And to that I say, yes. Yes I am. And I actually think this musical cue is important for setting the tone. Despite being a meta-horror comedy, it is important to let the audience know through the music that this is, first and foremost, a horror film. So what makes this cue scary? Well, the low drone noise evokes primal fears that all humans have. The fear of a predator with a low-pitched footstep or a growl, the fear of earthquakes, the fear of an avalanche, etc. Maybe you'll find this example insightful. Mammals first appeared on Earth during the Cretaceous period, aka when the T-Rex lived. In this video by Dangerville, he explains that the T-Rex would have emitted a low-pitched sound, a sound that would have indicated to mammals that a large predator was near. Now, assuming you all believe in evolution, this fear of low-pitched sounds would have been passed down to humans, which is why we find these sounds in movies intimidating. Next, the loud crashing noise is what is known as a non-linear sound. When visualizing sound, we look at sound waves, which twist and turn like ocean waves, or like sine and cosine graphs. A non-linear sound is a sound with an irregularly large amplitude, aka the height of the wave, in contrast to the other sounds present. The larger the amplitude, the higher the volume and pitch. An example of this would be a man shouting in a library where everyone else is whispering.
Fuck all this bullshit, what the fuck?
The reason this crashing noise evokes fear is because it disrupts the current sound environment, both with its volume and its pitch. It is irregular, which ties into our fear of the unknown. Another interpretation is that it sounds like lightning, and lightning is scary and hurts people. Duh. Alongside the crashing sound, the high-pitched sounds evoke the noise a blade makes when scraping a surface, which is fitting considering this movie is about a killer with a knife. And as for the whoop noise, it is yet another example of an unfamiliar noise that puts the audience on guard. Personally, I've never heard it in other films, so that could add to its unfamiliarity. So with all that out of the way, let's establish a list of things to keep in mind. Number 1. Low-pitched noises evoke primal fears, making their usage effective by default. Number 2. Nonlinear sounds are loud, high-pitched noises that disrupt the sound environment, creating surprise. Number 3. Unfamiliar sounds, such as the whoop noise, play off of our fear of the unknown. Once the logo and title have passed, we are introduced to Casey Becker, a 16 to 18-year-old girl who is making popcorn and preparing to watch a scary movie when she gets a phone call.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes?
Who is this?
On the other end is the killer, aka Billy Loomis. Yes, I will straight up claim who is calling her in this scene. We will get to Billy later, but I claim this now because Billy's voice is far more relaxed and seductive than Stu, the other killer.
2 years ago, we started off hot and heavy.
Who is this?
You tell me your name, I'll tell you mine.
Plus, this caller is knowledgeable of horror movies, just like Billy.
The Exorcist was on. Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs. Anthony Perkins, Psycho.
If you are mad that I spoiled the twist, too bad. I warned you. Anyway, the two of them chat for a few minutes, and generally speaking, things are pretty normal. So far, there is no music in this scene, just the relaxing sound of crickets. The lack of music frames this conversation Casey is having with the caller as normal and signals to the audience that everything is fine. That is until...
You never told me your name.
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.
We hear our first musical cue after over 2 minutes of silence. It is the sound of a piano playing the notes C, C sharp, and D sharp in rapid succession. There isn't anything innately terrifying about this little melody, but it does disrupt the silence and indicates that something is off about what the killer said. As Casey checks outside to make sure nobody is there, the piano begins playing with atonality and dissonance.
Hello?
What exactly is atonality and dissonance? Atonality is the lack of a tonal center. Usually in music, all of the notes, melodies, and harmonies revolve around a single note, making it the tonal center. Here's a short example. Notice how everything in the example seems to revolve around C. Atonality would be the opposite of that. Rather than using an organized structure such as a scale or key signature, atonal music can use any note, any interval, and any sequence. The lack of note organization and unpredictable intervals create a sense of unease, which complements Casey's unease at the fact that somebody might be watching her. On the other hand, dissonance is when 2 or more notes are played in unison and do not harmonize well. What causes them to not harmonize is that there is an uneven ratio between the sound waves of the 2 or more notes. For example, 2 notes played in unison that do harmonize well may have a sound wave ratio of, say, 2 waves of one note to 1 wave of the other note. This would be an example of consonance, or notes being played in unison that sound pleasant. A dissonant ratio, however, may be something like 7.7 waves of one note to 1 wave of the other, a very uneven ratio. That's just the physics behind it. So since dissonant chords and intervals sound unpleasant, they too complement the unease of this scene. Let's add this to the things to keep in mind list. Atonality and dissonance in music create a sense of unease. As a side note, I wanted to nitpick how when the killer says,
I want to know who I'm looking at.
It sounds like the beginning of his sentence got cut off. It doesn't ruin the film, but I still find it kind of weird. After Casey hangs up on the caller, he calls again and the same C, C-sharp, and D-sharp melody plays, indicating that it's the same eerie caller. Accompanying the atonal and dissonant piano is a long, high-pitched squealing noise, presumably played on a violin. This noise constantly fluctuates between the notes G-sharp and G, a dissonant minor second interval, and evokes the sound of a person screaming.
Yes?
I told you not to hang up on me.
Fitting for this movie, would you say? Finally, after Casey hangs up, walks to the kitchen, and is called again, the high-pitched squealing rapidly increases in pitch, while the accompanying voice crescendos to a loud thud.
Listen, asshole!
No, you listen, you little bitch. You hang up on me again, I'll gut you like a fish, understand?
I can't figure out what instrument the accompanying voice is, but I would assume a string or a brass one. The caller then threatens Casey. Notice how you can hear loud thuds in the score, almost as if they are the sounds of somebody trying to break into her house.
Can you handle that? Blondie.
The music finally ramps up as the caller correctly guesses Casey's hair color. As she runs down the halls, locking every door, we can hear more loud percussive thud noises in the score, once again evoking the sound of a break-in. The tense music dies down as Casey locks the last door and looks outside, indicating that she may be safe.
Can you see me?
As the caller threatens her again, the music crescendos until she hangs up.
What do you want?
To see what your insides look like.
After she hears the doorbell ring, followed by the phone, the music continues to remain eerie until...
My boyfriend will be here any second and he'll be pissed when he...
His name wouldn't be Steve, would it?
The tense music dies down again and is replaced by silence mixed with more loud percussive thuds. This change signals to the audience that the caller is more in control of the situation than Casey thought, knowing her boyfriend's name and having something prepared on the patio. And what do you know? It's Steve tied up.
Oh, God!
As Casey panics and the caller toys with her some more, we can hear a ghostly echo played over her terror.
Turn off the light. You'll see what kind of game.
As of right now, we haven't seen the killer in the flesh, so this music could be considered foreshadowing. In the Scream movies, Ghostface wears a peanut-eyed ghost mask. Duh. Which is why I consider this music foreshadowing. It only makes sense that ghostly music would play for a Ghostface killer. Now, this is where the music gets interesting. As the caller tells Casey the rules for his game, we can hear light percussion that represents blood-pumping tension. Casey is being quizzed, and if she fails, Steve dies. But when you really pay close attention to the piano, you can hear the Halloween theme. Let me pitch shift and slow it for comparison. This was an interesting catch, as most people who have discussed Scream's meta elements haven't mentioned it in the music. It's also fitting that the caller asks Casey who the killer was in Halloween. The music slightly crescendos and reverts to normal when Casey gets the right answer to create tension and resolution.
Michael.
Yes, very good.
However, when Casey incorrectly guesses Jason as the killer in Friday the 13th, we can hear the music become more distorted as a horn violently plays.
Jason's mother, Mrs. Voorhees, was the original killer. Jason didn't show up until the sequel.
Indicating how gut-wrenching her mistake was. Pun intended. Steve's death is marked with a combination of everything we've covered so far. Atonality, dissonance, ghostly echoes, high-pitched squealing noises, distorted horns, and loud percussive thuds. This is a big deal, not only for the scene, but for the film and franchise as a whole. Steve is the first person killed on screen, meaning the music accompanying his death had to evoke as much unease and terror as possible. This musical cue also indicates that this is no prank. The caller is dead serious about his intentions. pun intended as well. Casey is asked her final question, and we continue to hear ghostly echoes mentioned earlier. An idea that I have is that the music is not only complimenting Ghostface, but also Steve, who is now a ghost. Don't take that seriously. After Ghostface throws a chair through the glass door, Casey runs to the kitchen and grabs a knife, another reference to Halloween. The music ramps up just as it did when she was locking the doors because her house has officially been breached. I'd call this musical parallelism, as heart-pounding music plays anytime Casey's house isn't secure. I don't know how intentional this choice was, but I will say, Scream is filled with a lot of visual parallelism. So, maybe. Once she is armed, the music dies down again, which by the way, I should start using the Italian word for that, decrescendos. However, when Ghostface runs by, the music and tension crescendos again until Casey makes it outside. This happens 3 more times in the next few seconds of the scene. Ghostface will appear, and the music will become more intense. However, as Casey's parents' car approaches, the music becomes less eerie and more soft. The Italian word for this would be pianissimo, which when written on staff paper would say PP very soft. Oh. Ultimately, the music is supposed to indicate to the audience that the car and its occupants are warm and welcoming. All Casey has to do is get there. But she gets caught. As she runs, the music is at its peak tension. Loud thuds, distorted horns, high-pitched noises, atonality, dissonance, and another thing I noticed, bells. This film uses bells a lot in its score, most likely to evoke death. My reason for this is the poem For Whom the Bell Tolls by cleric John Donne, which states that the bell tolls for the dead. In the centuries following his death, this phrase has been used extensively, notably used by Ernest Hemingway and Metallica. So considering the historical correlation between death and bells, I think it is fitting to include bells in this film's score, and especially this scene. By the way, those of you who thought it was stupid that Casey stopped to look at her parents' car need to understand something. When Casey was hiding in this shot, the car was out of her view. The camera angle we saw of the car driving up was for the audience, so it makes sense that she would pause, because she was seeing the car for the first time and was caught off guard. Sadly, this mistake would also prove to be gut-wrenching. The music that plays when Ghostface chases Casey and stabs her is predominantly high-pitched, dissonant, and reminiscent of a scream. These sounds are sustained for the entire shot up until she is stabbed, keeping the audience in suspense as to whether she will make it or not. From here until Casey's parents enter the house, the music no longer has as much tension, because the killer finally got her. All that is left is a ghostly, mournful echo that gradually crescendos. Which is kind of redundant for me to say, to be honest, since the definition of the word crescendo already includes the word gradually, but whatever. This is also the first time in the movie that the music actually follows a key signature and abandons its atonality. While atonality can evoke fear, uneasiness, distortion, and other synonyms, it isn't very good at portraying sadness, heartbreak, failure, hopelessness, and more sad-based emotions rather than fear-based. As for what key signature is being used, it is F-sharp minor. See, I have perfect pitch, which means I can hear literally any song that doesn't use atonality and tell what key it's in. Now you might be thinking, why was F-sharp minor chosen to accompany Casey's death? What makes that key so fitting? Well, in my opinion, F-sharp minor is the third most sad/negative sounding key behind C-sharp and G-sharp minor. An example of a gloomy song in F-sharp minor would be The Sound of Silence by Disturbed, aka the Down with the Sickness people.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again. Oh,
Whether Scream composer Marco Beltrami would agree that this key is as gloomy as I do, I don't know. But the fact that he used this key indicated that he felt it would go well with the scene. It's hard for me to prove how certain keys convey certain emotions better than others, but once you've listened to hundreds of songs, recognized the intervals and melodies used, and noticed the patterns between subject matter and keys used, you would probably agree with me. Finally, as the parents discover Casey's body, we hear one last round of crashing noises and a crescendo, ending the scene. That was a lot to cover. Going off topic for a second, I think it's worth noting that Billy and Stu were both at the house in 2 costumes. I believe this because later in the film, Dewey and Sheriff Burke confiscate a dumped Ghostface costume at Sidney's house, yet the killer still wears one later. A counter-argument could be this line Dewey later says,
"We sell this costume every 5 and dime in the state."
But I think it's more likely that both wore costumes. I already established Billy was on the phone, so it would be too difficult for him to kill Steve in the time it takes for him to die. This means the Ghostface by the patio was Stu, while the one at the front door was Billy, which also explains how he knew Casey heard the doorbell. This also makes sense when you consider the "what door am I at" question, as both killers were at a door. She was dead either way. Since Stu was on the patio, he would have ran inside in this shot, unlocked the door for Billy, as Casey's parents noticed the unlocked door, and both killers would have searched the house. I also think it was Billy who stabbed Casey due to the visual parallelism we see later in the film. Plus, Billy is obviously the main killer. Wes Craven and screenwriter Kevin Williamson would want to give Billy the big opening kill. However, I do believe that off-camera, Stu might have dealt the final blow to Casey and gutted her while Billy tied the swing around her and hung her. I think it's cool that you periodically hear a dog barking in the background,
I want to know who I'm talking to.
indicating that the killers have moved and caught the dog's attention. I also appreciate the use of the Dutch camera angle, aka a tilted camera angle, when Casey's mom hears her over the phone wheezing. And finally, I think that the choppy frame rate during the dolly shot of Casey's body adds to the terror of this scene. In fact, the original cut of the film had a smoother frame rate, but the MPAA didn't like how long the camera lingered on Casey's gutted corpse, so that's why it is a lot more choppy, which to me enhances the scene. Music plays a huge part in why this scene is so effective at captivating the audience. The atonality and dissonance creating unease in the score, the loud percussive thuds that sound like a break-in, the low-pitched drones that tap into our primal fears, the high-pitched non-linear noises that catch us off guard and remind us of a blade scraping a surface or a scream, the distortion in the instruments, the bells that correlate to death, the soft section to imply safety when Casey's parents come home, and the sorrowful F-sharp minor ending. These are all elements that, when working together, make this opening scene one of the greatest. In fact, I want you all to take a look at this video. It is an alternate opening to Scream 4, but without any music.
What are you crazy, you bastard!
Doesn't it feel weird? Like, this situation is terrifying, but it just doesn't hit you as hard. And that's the power of music. As Eli Roth once said, if you don't want to be scared in a horror film, don't close your eyes, close your ears. Now, since I am a one-man army and it's been hard finding time to edit this, I will be dividing my analysis into parts, so stay tuned for the next one. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and consider subscribing, as I plan on making more content like this in the future. Thank you all for watching.